Hi, welcome to part 3 in our unit related to prehistoric art. When we think about prehistoric art, and again, that's art before the invention of writing, likely the first thing that comes to mind are the beautiful cave paintings that we looked at. We just finished looking at the caves at Glasgow in France. And one of the things that we noticed were the very expressionistic and also naturalistic images of animals, bulls, bison, deer, and other species. It is important to note that prehistoric art has been found around the globe, not just in Europe, in North and South America, Africa, Asia, and Australia as well. And so this time we're actually going to be looking at some prehistoric sculpture. And again, the emphasis is on animal forms in a sense, and we actually see the use of an actual animal bone that has been shaped to look like a canine or the face of a canine or dog that you can see here. This was excavated in Mexico, and it is very fascinating. It's this sort of dog-like animal. It was discovered accidentally in 1870 in Taquica, Mexico, in the Valley of Mexico, where Mexico City is located today. The carving likely dates sometime between 14,000 and 7,000 BCE. An engineer found it at a depth of 12 meters, and that's about 40 feet, when he was working on a drainage project. The Valley of Mexico once had held several lakes. The geography and climate of this area was considerably different in the prehistoric area than it is today, and that's something that we also have to think about as well when we're learning about these objects. So if you look at the title, it says a camelid sacrum in the shape of a canine. So the sculpture was made from the now fossilized remains of the sacrum of an extinct camelid. This was a member of the Camelidae family. So you want to think of camels and llamas and alpacas. I think that's how you say it. The sacrum is a large triangular bone at the base of the spine. You can see where holes were cut into the ends of the bone to represent nostrils. And it's also, the bone has also been engraved and incised, although it is difficult to see in the photograph. So here's a lithograph drawing of the sacrum. Again, if you ever take yoga class, you always hear them say, when you're sitting, sit, sort of on top of your sacrum, so you're sitting straight. So anyway, this is what sort of the bone looks like. And here you can see how it's been carved to look like the head of the camelid. So the shape was created by using subtractive techniques. So again, that's carving away the material, in this case bone, as opposed to additive, like where you might, like with clay, you might add something. So this is a subtractive technique, and it's utilizing already apparent features in the bone, like the holes for the eyes. So these are actual holes that are in your sacrum. So they're sort of, have sort of taken the shape of the sacrum and sort of used it and thought, oh, this kind of looks like, the head of an animal. So, and tried to carve it to sort of enhance the shape. And because the carving was made in the period before writing had developed, it is likely impossible to know what the sculpture meant to the carver and to his or her culture. One possible way to interpret the object is to look at it through the lens of later Mesoamerican cultures. So again, Mesoamerican is referring to ancient cultures in North and South America. One anthropologist has pointed out that in Mesoamerica, the sacrum is seen as sacred, and that the Mesoamerican Indian language named this bone with words referring to the sacredness and the divine. In English language, sacrum is derived from Latin, os sacrum, meaning the sacred bone. The sacrum is also perhaps significantly for its meaning located near the reproductive organs. So again, this idea of reproduction was probably also a very important concept for prehistoric people during this time period. So when studying the rituals and the language and iconographic evidence of later Mesoamerican cultures, it does strongly suggest that the sacrum bone was an important bone to the Mesoamerican cultures, relating to sacredness, to this idea of resurrection, and also to fire. The importance attached to this bone is not limited to Mesoamerican culture. From ancient Egypt to ancient India and elsewhere, there is an abundant evidence that the bone at the base of the spine, including especially the sacrum, were seen as sacred. So other cultures as well that we're going to be studying, there's evidence to support this sort of ritual or sacred idea related to this particular bone. So again, these are just, we don't know for sure. These are just sort of interpretations and ideas that historians and anthropologists and archaeologists have shared and tried to think about in terms of trying to interpret what the meaning of this piece could have been. So again, we cannot be certain of the object's original meaning from either the artist or the people that produced it. So one of the things that we talked about when we were learning about or talking about our sort of introduction to art history was this idea of form and context, and that's sort of the two characteristics that sort of make an object an art form. So we talked a bit about the form and this idea of a bone, the sacrum, being sort of shaped into this animal head. But let's think about the context, and we have a little bit talking about why this, they would have done this and the sort of meaning or ritualistic meaning behind it. Again, this idea of the sacrum, perhaps being located near the reproductive organs, made it important. And also, again, we talked about this with the cave paintings. As hunters, early people had access to bones and the materials to carve them. So again, because this was a migratory hunting and gathering culture, animals were very important. So it would make sense too that they wouldn't just paint images of animals, but they would also utilize the bones as well. It was a first look at how people began manipulating their environment to create what they wanted. And this is really important as well. This idea we talked about of this idea of symbolic thought is something that seems to, have been part of human nature from the very beginning. The reason why this bone was chosen could be because it already resembled the shape of a canine face, or it was because the artist had already developed beliefs about the sacrum in relationship to reproductive organs, or the fact that it holds up the spine. Again, that's very significant. It holds us up and it elevates us, allows us to walk. Since it's accepted that this bone may have been a mask used in ceremony, the fact that it's an animal face shows us that people were still influenced by the other creatures in their environment and often connected them with spirituality. People at this time had even begun domesticating dogs, perhaps resulting maybe in this chosen subject. All right, so as I mentioned before, we are discussing global prehistory. So we're going to leave Mexico and we're going to travel to North Africa, to Algeria, which is North Africa, or Africa's largest country, and most of it falls within the Sahara Desert. So this is an image that we're looking at now. It also hosts a rich rock art concentration. So we're going to see some rock art and cave paintings. Most of the sites are found in the southeast of the country near its borders with Libya, Niger, but there are also important concentrations in the Algerian Maghreb and the Hogar Mountains in the central south. The most renowned of these areas is the Tassili in Yar, and I'm saying this wrong. And again, you can see it here. It's spelled right here. And the meaning of this word is plateau of chasms in the southeast. Water and sand erosion have carved out a landscape of thin passageways, large arches, and high pillared rocks. So you can kind of see one of this, and then this is the map of where we are. So Morocco, Algeria. And then you can see here, this is North Africa. And with Morocco, you can actually cross, and you can cross over into Europe, and you can take a ferry into Spain. I've actually done that. I've been to Spain, and it's really beautiful. And you take this ferry. It's only like an hour or 2 hours maybe, and then you can arrive in Morocco, and then you're in North Africa. So the carving of this landscape, I'll go back to this image, has created these sort of high pillared rocks that you can see here in the background. And these have been described as forests of stone. This was by a French archaeologist and ethnographer named Henri Lehout. And the resulting undercuts at cliff base have created rock shelters, which you can see here. With smooth walls, ideal for painting and engraving. You can actually start to see, this is an image, it looks like a human on this particular surface. Rock art in Thessaly, in the Thessaly region, was introduced to Western historians as a result of visits and sketches made by French legionnaires, in particular Lieutenant Brennan's during the 1930s. On several of his expeditions, Lieutenant Brennan's took French archaeologist Lehout, I'm not sure how you say his name, who went on to revisit the site in Algeria between 1956 and 1970, documenting and recording the images he found. More than 15,000 rock paintings and engravings dating back as far as 12,000 years are located in this region and have made Thessaly world famous for this reason. The art depicts animals, cattle, large, wild animals such as giraffes and elephants, as well as human activities, which we see here in this particular image. We see humans hunting as well as dancing. The area is especially famous for its round head paintings, which were first described and published by Henri Lehout in the 1950s. Though to date, from about 9,000 years old, some of these paintings are the largest found on the African continent, measuring up to 13 feet high. So again, it's unfortunate, when you're looking at art at a slide or in a book, and we don't actually get to see the scale of it. So some of these are quite large. Although the styles and subjects of North African rock art vary, there are commonalities. Images are most often figurative and frequently depict animals, both wild and domestic. There are also many images of human figures, sometimes with accessories such as recognizable weaponry or clothing. These may be painted or engraved, with frequent occurrence of both at times in the same context. Engravings, or you can also think of incising, are generally more common, although this may simply be a preservation bias due to their greater durability. So, again, with something that's carved or, scratched into a rock is probably going to be a little bit more, durable than something that's painted that might flake off over time. Right, so this is a beautiful rock painting entitled Running Horned Woman. The title by which the painting is commonly known today, obviously, because we can see that the figure is wearing this sort of elaborate horned headdress. So I want you to stop the recording just for a little bit, and on your own, I encourage you to do this every once in a while. See if you can cornflake it or use our paradigm of art historical analysis. And remember our expression, cornflakes make really funky popsicles. So you want to think about the content, the stuff. What do you see? Maybe jot down a quick list. The focus, where does our attention go to based on certain design elements used by the artist. And mood, is there sort of an emotional quality? Is it realistic? Is it stylistic? Is it expressionistic? So what sort of style has this been done in? What do you think its function might have been? And again, patron who might have had this work created, and also the setting in terms of where this would have been viewed, the actual original artwork would have been viewed. Okay, try to do this like we did with those two earlier pieces, and before you watch the recording, and then maybe watch and see if you were able to come with some of the same conclusions that I'll be telling you in a little bit. So this image was found in a cave so secluded and so difficult to access that art historians concluded that the collection of shelters and caves were likely a sanctuary. And the female figure that they think is being portrayed here, and it really is quite beautiful and really quite finished, is perhaps a goddess. We have here the figure, maybe a figure of a priestess of some sort of agricultural religion, or maybe a picture of a goddess of a cult. Again, maybe sort of a fertility cult, or maybe some sort of cult for the weather. I don't know if you can notice up here, but this looks like sort of like a rain cloud and sort of rain falling. It's really quite a beautiful, exquisite piece. And again, it's very sophisticated. So, who was the running horned woman? Was she indeed a goddess and her rock shelter some sort of sanctuary? And it's good, to always sort of ask questions. Why? Why does this? What did this image mean? Why did the artist make it? For so long, the search for the meaning in rock art was considered inappropriate and unachievable. Only recently have scholars endeavored to move beyond the mere description of images and styles, and using a variety of interdisciplinary methods make serious attempts to interpret the rock art, especially in the Central Sahara that we're looking at now. This painting was created with minerals on a rock wall. We've seen that before with the caves of Glasgow, and shows a large horned woman running among a crowd of other human figures. So this is the content. There are also what seems to be ornaments decorating the woman's body, and also perhaps a rain cloud over her head. So again, this is hopefully some things that you might have noticed when you're thinking about the content, what the stuff in the composition. The painting shows great contrast between dark and light mediums used. I think you can see that here with the darkness of the skin and sort of the whiteness of the ornamentation um, on her body. Most interestingly, though, and this is something you might not have noticed here in this area, is this really beautiful use of transparency with the larger woman and the figures behind her that show through. This is something you might not have noticed at first. And remember, you can always practice power sketching, our little activity that we do. You can also do this with some of these works that you're confronted with. And again, the more we look at something, the more we notice these details. And again, this idea of transparency and is something that we could really use in terms of interpreting this piece and coming away with the context of it. So let's think about what the artist was trying to communicate. Perhaps the painting is relaying that the survival of the human race started to rely more on organized, subtle groups of people rather than animals. The overlapping nature of the paintings also indicate that the smaller people could have been painted first and the larger woman painted over, which would require somewhat subtle people to return to the painting and also maybe different artists to visit the site. Um, so that signals this idea of people trying to make a site more permanent and maybe moving away from their migratory lifestyle. With the archaeological searches in the area, it has been found that the area was in fact inhabited by several generations. There's also some thought that because there have also been several headless figures scattered throughout the cave, the painting actually was depicting some sort of event. This was the very start of the idea that art could be used to document historical events. So again, maybe that's the function of this piece, and that the people of the time were already figuring figuring that out. The large woman's ceremonial dress supports this. The only thing that still remains animalistic and natural about the painting is the woman's horns, still showing symbolic spiritualism to animals. So here we have this sort of merging and an emphasis where in earlier rock art we saw just the depiction of animals and human figures, um, not so much. And then the representation were usually stick figures and not very naturalistic. Here we're seeing the human figure, again, a little bit more naturalistic, not realistic, but definitely stylized. But then and this merging with the animal, this connection to the animal spirit, perhaps. The apparent rain cloud above her, and possibly a rainbow below her. You can see here, I know it's something you might not have noticed, held by another figure, shows that people were still very much involved and inspired by their natural environment. So the weather as well was very important. They could still be very dependent on it as well. The rain cloud shows their need for rain to provide them with water and allow their crops to grow. Um, Also, we want to think about the difficulty and getting into this location. Remember, it was described as being very remote and very hard to get to. That this probably also elevated the site, the setting, as a kind of sacred space because it was so secluded and hard to get to. Remember, prehistoric people at this time, caves were not shelters. They were migratory and moved around. So the idea, this act of actually going into this very difficult place, obviously held some very important ritualistic and spiritualistic importance for the artist and the people. All right, so we're going to look at some more sculptural or three-dimensional prehistoric art. What you're looking at is one of the first ceramic pieces made from clay. You can see that it's intricately designed, probably using mineral and some sort of plant pigment. And I think the detail is quite extraordinary, and it seems like it took a lot of time to do. The vessel portrays an ibex, and this was a type of goat native to the area. And this was discovered in Iran. So again, remember, we're talking about prehistorical art. So we're looking at the area of the Middle East. And and also so here's the ibex form over here. And then if you look above, and it might be hard to see, but you kind of see these kind of distorted, elongated sort of animal forms. These are perhaps canines. And at the time, dogs were being domesticated and used to hunt animals like the ibexes. Also, if you look up here, and again, it's something again that you really have to look and really see, and it's hard to see in this image. But these are kind of weird little bird shapes, sort of repeated around the rim or the frieze of the vessel. The painting probably was done with a small brush made from some sort of plant material or human or animal hair. So let's look at the style. The design really does imply this sort of linear, this extraordinary use of line and outlining and the sort of movement of linear shapes that sort of create like the sort of movement of the horns, create this sort of implied circle. And so you can see that things have been stylized and reduced to more simpler shapes or sort of abstract shapes. And in the middle, there's a sort of symbol here, and some historians believe that this is perhaps a, a kind of clan symbol, or some sort of sign of family ownership. Sorry, I lost my train of thought there. So this belonged to a certain family. The vessel was found near a burial site. The image identifies the deceased as belonging to a particular group or family. So the existence of ceramic art meant that people were beginning to further manipulate their environment. Here, the use of the potter's wheel is a form of technology that is being used. So again, this idea of manipulating their environment. It shows that people knew where to find clay, sculpt it, and make and control fire. Another reason ceramics came into existence was this need for storage, which meant that people were starting to settle down, farm, and store their crops in vessels like this one to survive or even create a surplus of food. The delicate painting designs give the vessel value and do make it an object of beauty. Yet it was found around the area of an ancient excavated grave site. This meant that the people at Susa had a belief in the afterlife and might have buried valuables with people who had died. And this is very similar to what we'll see when we look at ancient Egyptians. The city of Susa might have been a trading city with connections and cultural transfers to Egypt as well. So I'm going to stop here. We still have some more to go through. There's probably going to be a part 4 and 5. So we're going to pick up again, and we're going to be again looking at some more prehistoric sculpture. And I think we're done with painting right now, and as well as architecture. So stay tuned.